The first time my father called me selfish, he said it like a verdict, not an opinion. Not loud. Not angry. Just final. We were standing in my driveway, the late afternoon sun slanting across the cracked concrete, lighting up the weeds I'd been meaning to pull for weeks. My daughter Sophia sat on the front step behind me, swinging her legs and peeling the paper off a juice box with careful fingers. She was 9. Old enough to understand tone. Old enough to know when adults were talking about her, without using her name. Dad didn't greet me. He didn't ask how work was going, or whether Sophia's cough had gotten better, or why there were dark circles under my eyes. He looked past me, straight at the house. "You have more space than you need," he said. Then he added calmly, "Stop being selfish. Your sister needs it more." That was it. No warm-up. No explanation. My sister Camila stood near her car at the curb, arms folded, her 2 boys chasing each other in tight, wild circles around the mailbox. They were laughing, loud and careless, kicking gravel into the air. One of them tripped and scraped his knee. Camila didn't move. She just watched me, waiting. I felt something inside my chest tighten, like a belt pulled one notch too far. "This is my house," I said slowly. Dad sighed, like I'd disappointed him by missing something obvious. "It's a family house," he corrected. "And families share when someone needs more." Sophia's juice box crinkled softly as she squeezed it too hard. I didn't turn around, but I felt it. The way she always went quiet when tension crept into a room. The way she tried to make herself smaller, without realizing she was doing it. Camila finally spoke. "The boys don't even have a yard," she said. "They're growing. They need room." I looked at her then, at the way she stood comfortably in her certainty, already rearranging my life in her head. At the way Dad nodded along, as if this decision had been made long before I was invited to hear it. "And Sophia?" I asked. "What does she need?" Dad glanced back briefly, like she was a detail he'd forgotten to account for. "She's adaptable," he said. "Kids are." That word landed heavier than the insult. Adaptable. Like she was furniture. I wanted to argue. I wanted to list everything I'd done to earn this place. The double shifts. The weekends. The years I'd spent rebuilding after my marriage ended quietly and painfully, without drama anyone else thought was worth remembering. I wanted to say that stability mattered. That uprooting a child mattered. Instead, I smiled. It wasn't kindness. It was reflex. "Okay," I said. Dad's shoulders relaxed immediately. Camila's mouth curved into something like relief. Not gratitude. Relief. As if I'd finally stopped being difficult. "We'll figure out the details," Dad said. "You can move into the downstairs unit. It's temporary." Temporary. Everything about me was always temporary to them. Behind me, Sophia stood up. She walked over and slipped her hand into mine without saying a word. Her palm was slightly sticky from juice, warm and trusting. I held on tighter than necessary. That night, after they left, the house felt different. Not emptier. Smaller. Like the walls had leaned in while we weren't looking. I tucked Sophia into bed and sat on the edge for longer than usual, smoothing her hair back the way I had when she was younger. She stared at the ceiling, eyes open. "Are we moving?" she asked. I considered lying. I considered softening it. "We might," I said. "But not tonight." She nodded once. "Okay." No tears. No questions. That scared me. After she fell asleep, I walked through the house slowly. The living room where I'd painted the walls myself because Camila didn't like the color. The kitchen where I'd replaced the broken cabinet hinge with my own hands. The small back room I'd turned into a homework corner because Sophia liked quiet. All of it suddenly felt borrowed. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Camila. "Dad says you understand. Thank you. This will mean everything to the boys." I stared at the screen for a long time before setting it face down. That was the moment something shifted. Not anger. Not yet. Awareness. They hadn't asked. They hadn't considered. They had decided. And I realized, standing alone in a house I'd fought to keep steady, that if I didn't stop this now, my daughter would grow up believing love was something you earned by disappearing. I turned off the lights one by one and went to bed, already knowing this wasn't just about space. It was about who was allowed to take it. By morning, the word selfish had settled into the house like dust. It was everywhere. In the way the kitchen felt quieter than usual. In the way Sophia ate her cereal without asking for more milk. In the way I caught myself calculating square footage in my head, as if I were already preparing to justify my existence. This wasn't new. That was the part one couldn't ignore anymore. Growing up, I had always been the reasonable one. The one who didn't need much. Camila needed help with rent in college. I had a job. I could manage. Camila needed someone to watch the boys when she went back to work. I worked from home. It made sense. Camila needed a little extra because motherhood was hard. Everyone agreed, including me. When my marriage ended, my parents told me I was strong, resilient, independent. Words that sounded like praise but really meant don't expect support. When I moved into this house 3 years ago, Dad called it a smart arrangement. Temporary. Practical. I paid utilities. I handled repairs. I landscaped the yard myself. No one called it rent, but no one called it generosity either. It was just understood that I would carry what I could. Sophia wasn't biologically mine. I'd adopted her when she was 4, after fostering her for nearly a year. My parents never said they disapproved. They just never adjusted. They forgot her birthday the first year, then the second. After that, they remembered, but vaguely, with last-minute gifts and polite smiles. "She's lucky to have you," my mother liked to say, as if Sophia were a favor I'd done for the universe. That afternoon, Camila stopped by again. No warning. She let herself in like she always did. The boys ran straight to the living room, scattering toys across the floor I'd just cleaned. "I've been thinking," she said, dropping onto the couch. "We'll probably need the bigger bedroom too. The boys can't share forever." I stared at her. "Camila, we haven't agreed to anything." She blinked. "Dad said." "Dad doesn't live here." Her jaw tightened. "You're really going to do this? After everything?" There it was. The ledger. Everything meant the times I'd watched her kids without notice. The groceries I'd covered when her card declined. The emergency loan she'd never repaid because things were tight. Everything meant my availability, my flexibility, my silence. "After everything," I repeated. "You want me to move my daughter into a basement so your kids can have a yard?" She shrugged. "It's not permanent. Nothing ever was. Except the expectation." That night, Sophia brought me a folded piece of paper. A drawing. Our house, carefully outlined. A tree in the front yard. 2 figures holding hands. She hesitated before pointing. "That's you," she said. Then quieter. "That's me." I made a small so we fit. Something inside me cracked, clean and sharp. I tucked her into bed and sat in the dark long after she fell asleep. I thought about how often I taught her to compromise, to share, to be kind. All good things, until they were used against her. At 11:18 p.m., my phone buzzed again. "Dad, we need to talk tomorrow. You're taking this personally." I didn't reply. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under the door. No stamp, just my name, written in a shaky but familiar hand. Inside was a note from Mrs. Alvarez, our next-door neighbor. "Your father was here last night. He asked questions about when you usually leave for work." I didn't answer. It didn't feel right. My pulse quickened. Why would he need to know my schedule? I stood at the kitchen counter, rereading the note, when something else caught my eye. The small lock on the hallway storage closet. I hadn't locked it. I never did. It was locked now. I tested the handle. Firm. Unmoving. That closet held paperwork. Insurance files. The folder with the house documents Dad had insisted on keeping organized. A folder I hadn't opened in months because I trusted him. Because trusting him was easier than questioning. I felt foolish. And then I felt angry. Not explosive anger. Focused anger. Sophia padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "Are they coming back today?" "I don't know," I said honestly. She nodded, then looked up at me. "If they do, can you tell them to stop deciding things for us?" The way she said us made my chest ache. Yes, I said. I can. And for the first time, I believed it. The call came while I was at work. I was halfway through a design review, my headset balanced on one ear, when my phone vibrated against the desk. Dad's name flashed across the screen. I ignored it. Then it vibrated again. And again. By the fourth time, my manager gave me a look. I muted my mic and stepped into the hallway. Yes, I said. We're meeting someone at the house, Dad said. In an hour. My stomach dropped. Meeting who? A contractor, he replied. To talk about changes. What changes? I asked, already knowing the answer. For the boys, he said patiently. We need to know what's possible. You don't have permission, I said. This isn't your decision. There was a pause. Then his voice hardened. You're being difficult. The old trigger. The familiar pressure. I closed my eyes. I'm not agreeing to anything. Well, he said, you won't be there anyway. The line went dead. I drove home faster than I should have. Every red light felt personal. When I pulled into the driveway, 2 unfamiliar trucks were already there. A man in a polo shirt stood near the side gate, clipboard in hand. Dad was pointing toward the back of the house, already explaining. I parked crooked and got out. What is this? I demanded. Dad turned, irritated. We're measuring. You can't just show up, I said. This is my home. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Stop being selfish, he said. This is for family. Sophia stood in the doorway behind me. I felt her before I saw her. The way her presence changed the air. Camila was there too, sitting on the porch steps, scrolling on her phone. She didn't look up. The contractor cleared his throat. Should I come back later? No, Dad said. We're fine. I stepped between him and the house. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. You need to leave. Dad stared at me, genuinely surprised. You don't get to talk to me like that. I do, I said. And you need to leave. For a moment, no one moved. Then Camila stood, her face tight. You're embarrassing us. I laughed once, short and sharp. You brought strangers to my house. She shook her head. You always do this. You make everything harder than it needs to be. The contractor shifted uncomfortably. I can reschedule. Yes, I said. You can. Dad turned to him. We'll call you. The trucks pulled away, leaving tire marks in the gravel. Dad stayed. You think you've won something, he said quietly. But you're forgetting where this house came from. That landed. Not because it was true, but because it was meant to remind me I was replaceable. That night, Sophia asked if she could sleep in my bed. She hadn't done that in years. I didn't ask why. I just lifted the covers. She curled into my side, clutching her pillow. If we have to leave, she whispered, can we go somewhere with a door that locks? I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. Why do you ask that? She hesitated. Because they come in a lot. I thought of the unlocked closet, the questions about my schedule, the way Dad moved through the house like it already belonged to him. Something cold settled in my chest. After she fell asleep, I got up quietly and went to the hallway closet. The lock was still there, still firm. I checked my phone. No messages. No explanations. Just silence. I didn't sleep much. At 6:02 a.m., I heard the front door open. Softly. Deliberately. I sat up, every muscle alert. Footsteps. Not Sophia's. Too heavy. I reached for my phone and opened the camera app without turning on the flash. I cracked the bedroom door and looked down the hall. Dad stood in the kitchen, going through my drawers. I didn't yell. I didn't confront him. I stepped back into the room and locked the door. And in that moment, I understood something with absolute clarity. This was no longer about space. It was about control. And I was done pretending it was anything else. I didn't confront my father that morning. That surprised even me. Instead, I waited until I heard the front door close. Until his footsteps faded. Until the house felt like mine again. Quiet, cautious, wounded. Sophia was still asleep when I went back into the kitchen. The drawer he'd been rummaging through was slightly open. Inside, folders were misaligned, corners bent. He hadn't been careful. He hadn't expected resistance. That was his mistake. I pulled everything out and spread it across the table. Utility bills, insurance statements, old warranties, and then a thinner folder I didn't recognize. No label, just a rubber band holding it together like it wasn't meant to be seen. Inside were copies, bank printouts, transfer confirmations, property tax receipts. My name wasn't on them. Camila's was. And Dad's. I sat down slowly. The amounts weren't dramatic at first. A few hundred here, 1,000 there, but they stacked. Months of quiet movement. Money siphoned from an account I recognized immediately, my late aunt's estate. The one Dad had been managing since her death. She'd left funds specifically earmarked for the upkeep of this house. For Sophia's stability, Dad had said at the time. For the family. Family. My hands were steady as I kept reading. The dates told a story. Transfers lining up perfectly with Camila's financial crises. A car repair. A missed rent payment. A vacation deposit. They hadn't asked me to move because they needed space. They needed liquidity. My phone buzzed. Camila. I let it ring. Then a text appeared. Dad says you're acting unhinged. We need to finish this before it gets messy. Before it gets messy. I looked around the kitchen. The chipped counter I'd refinished myself. The crooked cabinet handle Sophia insisted on keeping because she liked how it looked wonky. This wasn't messy. This was stolen stability. I made 2 calls. The first was to the bank. The second was to an attorney whose card I found tucked into the folder. By noon, everything was clear. Dad was not authorized to move that money the way he had. Camila knew. And the house, this house, was legally protected in ways Dad had been careful not to mention. I didn't feel victorious. I felt calm. At 3:40 p.m., they came back. All 3 of them. Dad knocked this time. Hard. Impatient. I opened the door with the folder in my hand. We need to talk, he said. I agree, I replied. Camila stepped inside without waiting, eyes scanning the room like she was already measuring it again. You can't just freeze things, she said. You're putting us in a position. I know, I said. Dad frowned. What did you do? I handed him the folder. He flipped through it once. Twice. His face changed, not dramatically. Subtly. The way people look when a lie realizes it's been caught. This is a misunderstanding, he said quickly. No, I said. It's documentation. Camila's voice rose. You went behind our backs? I laughed softly. You came into my house while I was sleeping. Dad stepped closer. You're overreacting. That word again. Always meant to shrink me. I took a breath. You don't get to make decisions for me anymore. He scoffed. You wouldn't survive without this family. That's when Sophia appeared in the hallway. She didn't hide. She didn't cling. She just stood there. Camila noticed her and softened her voice. Sweetie, wouldn't you rather live somewhere with more kids? Sophia looked at her, then at me. I like where I am, she said. Simple. Clear. Dad opened his mouth. I raised my hand. No, I said. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just no. The room went silent. I continued, steady. You're not listing the house. You're not moving my daughter. You're not touching the accounts. And you're not coming here without permission. Dad stared at me like he didn't recognize who I was anymore. That's not how family works, he said. This is, I replied. Camila's eyes filled with tears, but not the kind that meant regret. The kind that meant consequences. You're choosing this, she whispered. Yes, I said. I am. Dad shook his head slowly. You'll regret this. I met his gaze. I already regret waiting this long. They left without another word. I locked the door behind them. Sophia exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. Are we okay? She asked. I knelt in front of her and looked her in the eyes. We are safe. She nodded, satisfied. And for the first time since my father had called me selfish, The word lost its power. Because choosing my child wasn't selfish. It was necessary. The fallout didn't come all at once. It arrived in pieces, missed calls, clipped messages, people speaking about me instead of to me. I let it. Silence had become a boundary, and I was learning how to hold it without guilt. 3 days after they left, Dad showed up again. This time alone. I saw his car from the window and felt my body tense out of habit. Sophia was at the table doing homework, her pencil tapping softly against the page. She glanced up at me, reading my face the way children of tension always learn to do. "I'll handle it," I said. She nodded and went back to her work. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Dad didn't waste time. "You've made things very difficult," he said. I leaned against the railing. "I know." Camila had already called. Crying. Accusing. Bargaining. She said the word family like it was a weapon. She never mentioned Sophia. Dad followed my gaze to the house. "You've poisoned her against us." I shook my head. "You erased her without noticing." His mouth tightened. "You always dramatize." "No," I said. "I minimize. That's what you trained me to do." That landed harder than yelling ever could. "You think this makes you strong," he said, cutting us off. "I think this makes me honest," I replied. He scoffed. "You'll need us again." I smiled, not the old reflexive one. This one was real. "No," I said. "I won't." He stared at me, searching for the crack. The apology. The opening. There wasn't one. "You're choosing a child over your blood," he said, finally. "Yes," I said again. "Every time." For a long moment he said nothing. Then he stepped back, shaking his head. "You've changed," he said, like an accusation. "I know," I replied. He left without another word. Inside, Sophia looked up as soon as I closed the door. "Is he mad?" "Yes," I said. She considered that. "Will he come back?" "Not like this," I answered. She nodded, satisfied. That night, I listened to the voicemails I'd been avoiding. My mother cried softly, confused. Said she didn't understand how things had gone so far. Said families shouldn't treat each other like strangers. Camila left 2 messages. One angry. One desperate. Both asked for help. Neither mentioned my daughter. Dad left the last one. "You think you've won," he said. "But you've torn this family apart." I saved it. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. The next week was paperwork and resolve. I finalized account restrictions. I changed locks. I installed cameras. I didn't announce any of it. I didn't explain. At work, my focus sharpened. At home, the air felt lighter. Sophia noticed. She stopped hovering. She stopped asking if we were in trouble. One afternoon, she taped a new drawing to the fridge without asking permission. It was of our house, the yard, and a sun so big it barely fit on the page. "We're staying," she said. "Yes," I replied. "We are." Camila tried one last time. She showed up while Sophia was at school, eyes red, voice shaking. "I don't know how to do this without you." I didn't invite her in. "You do," I said. "You just don't want to." She stared at me like I'd betrayed something sacred. "You're really not going to help?" she asked. I thought of Sophia folding herself smaller to fit. "I already am," I said. "Just not you." She left angry. And for the first time, I didn't chase after her. That evening, Sophia asked if she could plant something in the yard. "Something that stays," she said. We chose a small flowering shrub together. We dug the hole, packed the soil, watered it until the ground darkened. "This one's ours," she said. "Yes," I told her. "It is." I stood there long after she went inside, watching the light fade over the house I'd almost given away. For years, I'd confused compliance with love. I thought saying yes made me good, made me worthy. I was wrong. Saying no didn't break my family. It revealed it. And in that revelation, I finally chose myself and the child who had always chosen me. The morning after the confrontation, the house felt different. Not just because the living room was quieter, or because the yard was calm. It was the kind of silence that arrives after a storm, when the sky hasn't cleared yet, but the rain no longer falls. Sophia came into the kitchen with her hair still damp from the shower. She wore her favorite hoodie, oversized and soft, and carried the small flowering shrub we'd planted the day before. She sat it carefully on the counter, as if even the kitchen deserved respect now. "Mom," she said softly, "can we make a little garden just for us? Just things that belong here?" I smiled, brushing back a stray lock of hair from her face.
"Yes,
"We can." That afternoon we started small. A few potted flowers lined the windowsill. A tiny herb garden on the balcony. Every plant, every sprout became a symbol, not of revenge, not of defiance, but of claiming space that was ours, that had always been ours. I didn't contact my parents. I didn't answer any of their texts. At first, I worried about how it would feel, ignoring the people who had raised me, but the emptiness was liberating. There was no guilt, no manipulation, no expectation of approval. Just air to breathe. By the third day, Sophia began drawing again. She taped a new picture to the fridge, carefully centered between the magnets. It was our house, the yard, the sun blazing high, and 3 stick figures holding hands. Her, me, and the little cat she insisted on drawing as part of the family. "It's permanent," she said, eyes bright, proud. "Yes," I said. "It is." That evening, I lit the fireplace for the first time that week. Sophia curled up on the rug with her sketchbook, filling pages with imaginary adventures. I watched her, tracing the lines of her small hands as she drew. Every stroke was confident, purposeful, and mine to witness. No one else mattered in that room. Weeks passed. Phone calls slowed. Messages stopped. It wasn't anger that filled the space my family had once occupied. It was calm. Quiet victories that didn't need celebration. Sophia started sleeping through the night again. Not perfectly, not like nothing had happened, but with enough peace to restore the rhythm of childhood. She laughed without checking over her shoulder. She painted the birdhouse purple and yellow, crooked heart included, and declared it ours to keep. I realized then how much of my life I'd spent shrinking myself, making myself smaller to fit their version of family, compromising my daughter's space, my own peace, my right to say no. Every time I'd said yes when I wanted to say no, I'd taught her the wrong lesson about love, power, and boundaries. Now we were learning a new lesson together. That saying no wasn't cruel. It was necessary. That protecting the people you love sometimes meant standing firm, even when the world or family called it selfish. Christmas came quietly that year. Not the grand, obligatory chaos of years past. No parties, no empty invitations. Just Sophia, me, and the small garden on the windowsill. Grandma visited, steady in her walker, warm and present, bringing cookies she insisted we decorate ourselves. She laughed when Sophia insisted on painting the edges of the tray green and red. "This house is alive," Grandma said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. "Because you make it so." Sophia nodded seriously. "It's ours," she said again. And this time, the words had weight because they were true. I watched her curl up with her sketchbook that night, tired, content, safe. I realized that the loud arguments, the threats, the veiled insults, it hadn't broken us. It had clarified us. We were small, yes, but unshakable. Later, I sat by the fireplace alone, reflecting on the past few weeks. The anger that had once simmered in me had softened into resolve. The fear had receded into vigilance, not paralysis. And for the first time in decades, I felt something rare, clarity. I didn't need permission. I didn't need approval. I didn't need to justify my right to protect my child or my home. Saying no, saying enough, saying this is ours, had been the greatest gift I could give her and myself. As the night drew on, I thought about all the moments I'd spent shrinking, all the times I'd been labeled selfish, and all the moments I'd silently carried other people's needs over my own. And I realized something crucial. Nothing I'd done in the past mattered now. What mattered was here. What mattered was this: a daughter who felt safe, a home that was ours, and a mother who finally understood the power of her own voice. Sophia slept through the night, her small chest rising and falling, her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. I watched until my eyes grew heavy, listening to the quiet that finally belonged to us. In that silence, I felt the weight of every compromise lift. The house was ours. The yard was ours. Our space, our rules, our life. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. We were safe. We were